Alrighty guys, so yeah, this isn't live, this is just a video I made for you. We just decided to do it this way this week. So I'm going to talk about a couple things and then we'll hop into the stuff that you need to go through and then we'll talk about the assignment. So the first thing is last week, we want to make sure that you get we talked about the migrations, right? So we want to make sure that your migrations are set up correctly. We got a subjects table, pages table, sections table, right? So you go in there, you create your migrations inside of your, the command prompt. You want to do the Rails generate. Okay, remember we did that last week. Generate your migrations. Once you do that, you should have your migration files in here. So this was for the subjects. Okay, so it's creating a subject do. It should have already done all that for you. The part you're going to type in is you want to create a column with the name of name. You want to create a column with position. And then you want to create a column called visible. And the name column is a string. The position column is an integer. It's a number. And then the visible column is Boolean, so true or false. Okay, so that's the up migration for subjects. Okay, and then we have the down migration, which is just drop the whole table, drop the subjects table. Okay, so you want to make sure you created that right and make sure you run it. Okay, the next one we have is pages. Okay, remember we got subjects, and then on each subject we have a bunch of subpages under the subjects, and then under the pages we have sections. Okay, so the pages migration is going to look like this. Okay, so we're going to have the subject ID, and that's going to be an integer. We have the name column, that's going to be a string. We have the permalink column, that's going to be a string. We have the position column, that's going to be an integer. We have the visible column, that's going to be Boolean. Then we got our timestamps. Okay, then we ended. Now remember, you want to create indexes on foreign keys. Okay, this columns that are going to call other tables. That's what a foreign key is. So we have subject ID is a foreign key. So down here we added an index to on the page, the column subject ID on the table of pages. Okay, and then the same thing here is we're going to be using this permalink column to search posts or to search things that people create inside of the database. So we're going to create an index on that as well. So add index, the pages table inside the column permalink. Okay, now just pay attention though that you don't add these indexes inside of here, because this is when you're setting up the table and all the columns. Okay, you're not going to be adding the index inside of there. You're going to be doing it outside of that. Okay, so this end ends the defining of the up migration, creates the table. Okay, this end is for this do. Okay, and then this end matches up with up here. Okay, and then we have defining the down migration. We just get rid of the whole table. Okay, and it's pretty similar to this one. So on the sections table, okay, we're doing a page ID, which is an integer. We're doing name, which is a string, position column, which is an integer, visible column, which is a Boolean, content type column, which is a string, content column, which is a text. So text just has an unlimited amount of characters you can put in it, where string limits you. I think the default's 255 characters. So here in content, this is where you're actually going to put in content on the page, and so you don't want to have that be limited. So that's why we used a text type. That doesn't limit you. Then the timestamps, okay, then it ends that do statement. Okay, and then page ID is going to be referring back to the pages table, okay, from the sections table. So this is going to be a foreign key. So because of that, we're going to add an index to it. So we're adding an index in the table sections to the column of page ID, right up here. Okay, so that ends the up migration. Then you have the down migration. You're just dropping the table sections. So that's what you should have done last week. Make sure you do that correctly, because we'll be using this later on to create the content management system that we're going to be doing here. Okay, so now this week we're going to talk about ActiveRecord and what it is and how you can use it to talk to your databases and do what you want with it. All right, so I'm going to open it up. So open up my command prompt. I'm going to go to the documents. Oops. Okay, I'm going to go to my ROR. I'm going to go to Heroku. So now I'm in the root folder. Now this is actually Heroku app. This is the one I test and play around with. So I'm just going to close that. Okay, that's annoying. There we go. And we'll do Atom space period because I want to open up this folder here inside of Atom. Okay, so I did the exact same thing. I added my migrations and I ran them. And you'll know if you ran them because we're going to open up pgadmin. I want to open that up as well because I want to make sure that everything I'm doing to the database reflects that. Okay, also we created this alter users. Well, that doesn't really have anything to do with anything. That has to do with this user thing that we created here. But we created subject pages and sections, so we want to make sure that that gets in there as well. So let's open that up. Go to servers, going to open this, drop it down. It's asked me for the password. So we got my databases. I am in Heroku right now. So Heroku development, schemas, public. I love how there's 8,000 drop downs, tables. So I ran them because I have my pages table, I have my sections table, and then I have my subjects table. Okay. So today what we're going to do is talk about, like I said, ActiveRecord and how we can manipulate the database that way. And we'll be playing around. You can pick whatever table you want to mess with. But I'm going to be messing with probably the sections one. Okay, but we'll get there when we get there. So we need to talk about ActiveRecord. You can see here, okay, when you're using these classes, okay, you're using this thing called ActiveRecord, and really all you need to know about that is it's just this way to connect Rails and SQL and databases together. So instead of having to type out, say, the SQL to create this column inside of this table, you can just type this Rails command and it knows what to do and it does it for you. That's basically what ActiveRecord is doing. It just allows you to, I guess the official definition here is it's a design pattern for relational databases. So databases that have tables that talk to each other. Okay, so ActiveRecord is not Rails specific. It's not only used in Rails. It's used in a bunch of different programming languages that allow you to easily talk with and communicate with these databases. Okay, so there's two things that you need to be aware of. There's ActiveRecord, okay, space. That's the thing that isn't Rails specific. It can be used for different programming languages, but then there's ActiveRecord with no space, and that's actually the Rails specific language that it's using. Okay. So we can come over here. So the reason why ActiveRecord is good is it lets you retrieve database data as objects and not static rows. So instead of having to go through and type out the SQL to access database information and things like that, we can use it as objects, and you'll see what we talk about. So we can create new objects by typing, say we wanted to create something, we could say user equals, and we're not going to do anything here, but we can say user.new. And what that does is it creates a new object called user, okay, and it stores it inside of this variable called user. And then you can do things like user.save, user.lastname, and you can start basically manipulating the database as needed. So we can come over here to like the sections and go to columns. We can start, I could say like user, well, I guess it'd be more like sections, but it'd be like section.id equals whatever, and then it would answer, it would create that object with a bunch of different properties. And then so when I set up that object with an ID, a name, a position, visible, and all of that, then I can commit those changes and save it to the database. So this is kind of stuff that I can sit here and blab about, but it's really not going to make a lot of sense until we actually see it. Okay, so anyway, so there's a few commands we need to know. So this would be how you would create the object. Okay, and then if I wanted, well, let's see if we, sorry, I got to go through my notes. And this, I'm not going to lie, this chapter was a little crazy for me. So if it seems like I'm kind of going, I kind of am, but I do get it. But anyways, you don't care about the excuses. But anyways, so let's do, well, so we could say something like user equals user dot new. So that would create the new user object and save it inside a user. And then we could say user dot first name is equal to Dave. Okay, and then it would just, it's using that object that we saved inside of users, and it's creating a property called first name. And then you can basically take these properties and translate them into like table columns, and then you can save them into the database and go from there. And I could have user dot, last name equals kid, right? Then I could start populating this object with all these different properties, and then once that object has been created, then I can take that object and then throw it into the database. And the way you do that is it's this command called user.save. So it would take this object that I created called user with all these different properties, last name, first name, ID, address, whatever I wanted to create, and then I say user.save. It takes that object and then basically converts it into database data. So it would take last name, first name, and so forth, make those columns, and then put it all into the database. So by using all those different properties and stuff, it can get pretty powerful. Okay, you could also do user.delete. Okay, and then that would delete that object. Okay, but we'll be doing a lot of this stuff. So there's also another thing called active relation, or it's sometimes called a rel. Okay, or active relation. Nope, no space. Okay, and that's used by ActiveRecord to help with more complicated queries or more complicated searching of databases and pulling information out and things like that. So an example of this is something like you could do users, okay, equals user. Okay, we're using that object again, and we could say where first name is equal to Dave. Sorry that it's going on the other line there. All right, so this is basically saying, all right, use this object of user, and we're finding, this is what the where is, we're doing a query. We're searching where the first name, that's the column, is equal to Dave. So that's just one way you can use this active relation to search databases and find things and using the Rails framework there. Okay, another thing you can do is you can say like users.order, so you can order things in a specific order. You can say order the last name ascending, and we're going to limit that to 5. So what that does is it'll take the user object and it'll go in there and find all of the different users, and it's going to order all of them by the last name ascending order. So ascending is basically, if it was 1 to 10, it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If it was A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it would, A's first, Z's last. And then limit 5 says only give me 5. So it basically give us the first 5 last name in ascending order. So we'll be doing a lot of this, but I'm just kind of giving you some examples right now of different things you can do. And the cool thing about this is, like what I just typed, you'd have to write out this huge SQL command that really isn't that easy to read. So you'd have to be like doing all this. Okay, I'm not even going to type it all out because it's going to take forever. But it's a big old SQL statement. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So that's where ActiveRecord and ActiveRelation come in, and they help us out where we can easily type these out and get the information from the database instead of having to remember all the SQL. All right, so a quick review. So when we create models, right, we go Rails generate, and we kind of already did this. We're going to generate a model, and we're going to call it a singular name in camel case. So if I had, hard subjects or hard subject or something like that. But we created a model called subject last week. Okay, and then once we did that, it created this migration file in here, subject, right? Okay, and we got in here and we told it to do some things. But it's using this class. Oh, wait. No, we don't want to be in here. We want to go into app. Sorry, we want to go into models is what we want. And there it is, subject. All right, so it created this class called subject, and it's using application record. Okay, so it can use all those different database commands and such. Okay. All right, so anyways, we got this class called subject. Sorry, I'm going to be pausing here every once in a while because I just don't want to be blathering on. But this tells to inherit everything from application records. So you come up here, and this is where it is. So application record, you can see inherits things from ActiveRecord. So that's how the ActiveRecord gets into there. Okay, but anyways, so the main thing to pay attention to here, though, is we have class subject. Okay, and then we have the name of subject here for our Ruby file, and then we're going to be calling different objects and stuff like that. So we're going to be dealing mainly with table names, file names, and class names, and that's what we want to do. Now we could do all this manually. I could create a subject.rb and I could go in there and do all these things, but that's the beauty of using these generate commands is they set up and they use the naming convention that Ruby is good and that it wants. Okay. All right, so for example here, if I go to user, okay, it's going to be, let's see. So we have this issue here. So if I come over here, if we go back to our database files, go to our migrations. So inside of here, remember, we named the table users to admin users. Well, that's going to cause some issues up here with our models because in here it's looking for basically a table called user. It's going to be looking for, because in here we alter it, it's going to be trying to find a table called users, but we change it to admin users, so that's a problem. So we would need to come in here to the user model, and we would have to come in here and basically define that, hey, it's going to be different. So we would have to come in here and say self.table underscore name is going to be equal to admin users. And you saw that it popped up. You'd already kind of recognized that. So we would need to basically say, hey, you're looking for a table called user because that's how it was set up to begin with, but we're changing that to admin users, so we need to let them know that. Okay, and if we don't, then that can mess with the whole naming convention of Rails, and things can explode, and we don't like things to explode. All right, so ActiveRecord allows us to add attribute to models pretty quick, and then that's going to be when we're talking about attributes, we were talking about when we create a variable that stores that class, okay, and then we said last name or whatever. That's different attributes of these objects that we can then stick inside the database. Now the cool thing about ActiveRecord is when I create, kind of like I already said, when I create these attributes, it knows to just take these attributes and put them in as columns, and it knows to take the values and put them in there inside of the rows, and it takes this object model of way of doing things and it converts it into a happy database structure. So if we go back to what we were doing here, okay, so we told it to be admin users, but another thing we need to do is we gotta rename this as well. So if I go rename, we need it to be admin underscore users. Okay, and so it's able to do that. Yeah, sorry guys. So if we kept this named users.rb, we would just need to do this to fix it. But really the better way of doing that is getting rid of it, renaming this to admin users, and then I can come up here and we're going to call this admin user. So the class of admin user. Okay, but I know I kind of botched that, but really we don't have to do that very much just because of when we generate things here, it does all the naming convention for us. But if we are changing this later on with migrations, we need to be aware of that, and we got to make sure that we get these models named correctly or things won't work. Okay, and actually I renamed this wrong. It needs to be admin user. Okay. All right, so if we wanted to, we could come in here and start defining things inside of the table. So we could come in here to admin user and we could say admin equals admin user, because that's the class, dot new. Okay, and then we could say admin, because we just created this new object here, this new admin user object, and we stored it inside of admin. So now we could say admin dot first name is equal to Dave. And we could just start putting in all of these different properties that will go into the database as columns. So when I do this, it'll go into the database, right? And it will, let's get out of sections here, we'll go into admin users. So it will go inside of the database and it'll look and go, oh, cool, there's a first name for admin users. And so it would know to put Dave inside of that column. It would say last name. It would know that last name exists in that database, and it'd put kid inside of that database. And so it's just smart enough, and it types it correctly as well. Like it knows that first name is strings, knows the last name is strings, so it'll automatically type and just do all this. So instead of having to type out all that SQL, I got to do is just create this new object, give it properties, and then it'll take those properties and put them in the database as we want, which is nice. Okay, so it's just a quick, easier way to do things inside of databases. All right, so that's kind of the theory. Sorry I stumbled through some of that. But, like we talked about before, I'm learning this with you guys. So now we're going to actually do some of this stuff. Okay? And we can do it through what's called the Rails console. We can't really do it in here. We have to actually open up the Rails console. I think we did this a couple weeks ago. But it's kind of like the console that we can go in there and start running Ruby command, and it'll start doing what we tell it to do. All right, so to get there, you go to the root folder that you're playing around in. Okay, and you can say Rails console, development. Okay, that'll say launch the console for the development environment that we've been messing around with the whole class. Or you can say Rails console and it kind of guesses and knows that you're going to be in the development. Or you can do the lazy way, which I love, and it's just Rails C. Okay, it'll take a few seconds to get that going. So it'll say loading development environment Rails. It tells us what version of Rails we're using. So now I can just start putting in commands if I want. So 1 + 1 is 2. Okay, you can start typing in Ruby stuff. I can say hello.uppercase, reverse. Okay, so it takes hello, it makes it all uppercase, and then it reverses it. So instead of HELLO, it's OLLEH. So you can see that you can just start putting in Ruby commands and it'll work. I can type exit, that'll take me back out. But if I want to go back in, Rails C. So this is the environment we need to be in to start doing these different database commands using ActiveRecord. So the database I'm going to be messing with here is going to be, we're not going to care about that. I'm going to be messing with subjects. Okay. So I'm going to start inserting things using ActiveRecord commands, and we'll be able to go in here and make sure that those changes are taking place. So I'll kind of move this over. All right, so I can do subject. This is going to be the variable that I stored in, equals subject new, dot new. Okay, and we can take a look at this real quick. Right, so this is the class that we're going to be using to create these different objects to insert them in there. And so we could do it this way, but we're going to be doing it through the Rails command prompt this time. Okay. Move this over. Alrighty. So I can say subject equals subject new. Okay, so it's using this class. It's creating a new object using that class. Okay, and I'm going to hit enter. And then you can see that it's like, well, I see it, but there's nothing, and it goes into the database and it takes a look. It sees, okay, there's a name column, so name column. There's a position column, There's a visible column, created at, and so forth. Okay, but I didn't define any of this stuff. So once I do that, then I'll be able to insert it into the database. All right, so now that I've created this, now this isn't in the database yet. I have to create the object first, and then I have to insert it. So I've created this new object called subject. Now I got to start giving it attributes. So I can say subject.name equals Ruby. I'm going to go subject more like subjects in school or subjects we learn about. Okay, so now that I set that, I hit enter. I can go subject.name, and it'll give me Ruby. I can say subject, and then it'll basically give me back what I've created so far. So it says, okay, inside of this variable subject that contains this object, we have this object with nothing for the ID. The name is Ruby. Okay, the position, we don't have anything. That's what nil means. It's just empty. We don't have anything for visible. We don't have anything for created at or updated at. All right, but the main thing here is this is not in the database yet. We're just creating this object and we're kind of putting everything inside of it. All right, so as we're playing around with this, we can check to see if it's been saved to the database yet. And the way you can do that is go subject.new record with a question mark, and it'll tell you true or false. If it says false, that means it's been these things that we've set up have been committed to the database. If it says true, that means it's still new. We're still creating it. It hasn't been put in yet. So there's another way to do this. So you saw up here I said subject.new, and then I started putting in name. I could put in visible if I wanted to. I could say subject.visible is going to be equal to true because it's a Boolean value. Okay, then I can say show me subject again. Now you can see that Ruby's in there for name. Visible is true, and the rest of it is empty. Okay, but there's another way I can do this. Is I can say subject.new, and then I can start, I guess, doing this kind of called the hash method. So I could say name equals with the greater than sign. You can call it first subject if I wanted to, and then comma, and then position. So you can see I can start defining all of this here. So I can say, all right, I want the position to be 1, comma, and you can see all of the column names start with a column. So then I could say, I don't need to define the ID because that gets done automatically once I put it in there. But the name I should define, the position I should define, and I'll define the visible as well. Oops, I forgot the comma there. So visible is going to be, we'll say false this time. And then the created at and updated at are going to be put in automatically. So once I type all that out, close it out with the parenthesis there. So you can see, all right, I'm using the class subject, I'm creating a new object, and I'm putting inside of that object, the name is going to be first subject, position is going to be 1, and visible is going to be false. So I can hit enter, and then it shows me, okay, this is what you've created so far. Okay, and I can still say, now if I go subject again, oh, that's the other one. So I didn't save that into a database. Yeah, I did that wrong. So it would have to be subject equals. I'd have to store that, right? So then I would type in all of that. So to copy things, this is a good one. We can right click and say mark. We're going to copy all this. And then we hit enter, which is kind of weird. That's copying. And then I can right click and say paste. But it wasn't able to get all of it. So visible, but that's okay. It got me most of the way there. Visible, false. So before it created it, it just didn't store it anywhere. So here now I'm doing subject. And what this does is it overrides the subject that we created before. So right up here that we're creating the name of Ruby and such. It's going to take that subject variable that we already created, and it's going to override. So Ruby now will be first name. I don't know if that's right over here. Going to make sure everything looks okay. Position. If that looks good. Position will be 1 and visible will be false. So we should be able to hit enter. Okay, it updated that. Now when I go subject, it kind of overrid everything. So now subject is first subject instead of Ruby. Position is 1, visible is false, and so forth. Okay, but again, new record, it's still true. So it's still new, it hasn't been put inside the database yet. All right, so now that we've created all that, we can put it inside the database. Okay, and to do that, we type subject.save, and that will actually commit it to the database. So I'm going to refresh this right now, Actually, no, I'm going to view it. So I'm going to view the data. I'm going to view all rows. Okay, there's nothing in here right now. So I'll commit the changes, subject.save. I hit enter. Okay, and then it tells me the SQL that it generates. So it generates the insert into subjects, name, position, visible, created at, blah, blah, blah. It puts in the values, and it just generates all the stuff for me. And then it says true at the end. True means that, hey, everything worked and everything was happy and we should do a little dance. So now I should be able to right click this, do view data again, view all rows, and then there it is. So first subject, position, visible, false. Okay, the ID was put in there because it's auto incrementing, and created at and updated at, that was just done by Ruby. Okay, so good stuff there. So now it got in there. Okay, so now if we say subject.newRecord, it says false because it's been committed to the database, and we know that it's in there now. Okay, and it's still remembering, so now we can say subject.id. Okay, it gives us the ID. We can say subject.createdAt. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Subject.created at, not create at. Okay, and it gives us the time that it was created. So we can go, now that it's been, even though it's been committed to the database, we can still use the object and access all the different properties that it got. And it's kind of cool because you can see the dual communication that's happening. The ActiveRecord put it inside the database, but also the database communicated back, hey, guess what? I actually gave it an ID, and I gave it a created and updated at timestamp as well. So, and we can pull those from the console. Let's see, we can do some coding here if we want. We can say if subject.save puts saved. Okay, we're just doing it line by line. It's kind of collecting the code, and then when we type an end, it'll run it. We can say else puts not saved. End. All right, so it says if subject.save. In other words, if that returns true, which it did up here, okay, when we said subject.save, it returned true right there for us. If it returns true, put saved. This is basically how you do an if-else statement inside of Ruby. So if subject.save is true, put saved. Well, it did. It did saved because it did get saved. Else puts not saved. So you can type in a little if statement, but to be honest, right, you have subject.newRecord. That kind of does it for you. It'll let you know that it's false because it knows that it's saved. All right, so this was called kind of the new save technique. This is basically like you create a new object. Geez, this is so fun to wade through. Where did it go? Right here. So you create a new object, so subject.new. Well, that's when I did it wrong. But anyways, remember we saved that inside a subject. So we had subject equals subject.new and all the different attributes, and then we saved it. So you create the object, you put in all the attributes for the object that are going to be converted into columns, and then you save it. Okay, there's another way to do this. It's called the create method. Okay, so this is, you don't have to really set it up. You're doing both in one statement. You're setting up the object, you're giving it all the properties, and you're saving it in the database all in one. So the way you can do that is we can say subject equals subject using the class, okay, dot create. So instead of dot new, like we had up here, subject dot new, it's going to be subject dot create instead. So subject dot create, and then we just start putting in the attributes. So name is going to be second subject. okay, comma, to separate them out. Position's going to be 2, okay, and visible is going to be, we want this one to be seen, so we'll say true. So the main difference here, the subject.new and the subject.create is just that. You put in the attributes the same way, but in this case, you're doing subject.create instead of subject.new. Okay, so I hit enter. I don't have to say subject.save. I don't have to do any of that. It does all of it in one statement. So now when I come back here and view the data, okay, we got the second one in there now. Second subject, the position's 2, the visible Boolean is true. Alrighty. Okay. And then, same thing. We can say subject dot new record. It's false. So you can see subject is being used here as just a variable to hold this object that we create that we then put inside of the database using, okay, the class subject. Okay, that's what we're using here, subject. We're using this class that uses the application record that then uses ActiveRecord to communicate with the database. So that's kind of all we're doing here is we're using ActiveRecord to use Ruby, these Ruby commands to communicate with the database and do things to it. All right, so next part is we're going to update records. In other words, everything that we're creating here, okay, columns, okay, and then we have these records, or we've kind of talked about this, but records is basically like rows. So just these individual pieces of data, or these records. Okay, so now that we put in this information, what if we wanted to update them? What if we wanted to change them and mess with them and change what they said and change what they do? And maybe we want this to be true now instead of false or things like that. So there's basically we have to do what's kind of called the find save method. So, but just like there were 2 ways to create, we could do subject.new and subject.create. There's 2 ways to do it. We can do, if we're only doing one record, it's a find update record. And there's another one called, really what you got to do is you got to find the record first and then you change it however you want. But we can also use an update attributes method that lets us do multiple ones at a time. So we'll do this. We'll do the one we'll do the one first here. So what we're going to use the ID because this is the primary key. This automatically gets incremented. This automatically puts it in there. We're going to use the ID to find what we want to update. So I can say subject.subject.find one, and I must have, I typed it wrong. Oops. So we say subject equals, I think I said dot. Good thing is you get errors if you do it wrong, so it helps you figure out what you did wrong. All right, so we say subject equals subject.find whatever has the ID of 1. So ActiveRecord is smart enough to know that when we use the find method, whatever number we put in here is going to be this ID, this primary key. Okay, it's not using position 1, it's using ID 1. Okay, it just does that by default. Okay, then you see that it brings back what it finds. So right here it's printing out what it finds. So the ID is 1, the name is first subject, the position is 1, the visible is false. Yep, there it is right there. So it pulled the right record. So we're good to go. So now that we've stored that object, it found the object in the database, it found this object right here, it found the record, and it stored it inside a subject. Now we can start messing with it. We can start doing what we want to do. Okay, so I could say like, just like we did before, subject.name, it would give me first subject. I could say subject.visible. Okay, it gives me false because that's what it is. So we know that we have the right record here, the right object, whatever we want to call it there. So if I wanted to change it, I could say subject.name equals something else. This is where I could call it Ruby on Rails. Okay. Now if I come here, okay, it's still first subject because we haven't committed the changes yet. So right now we're just manipulating the object again. We're just setting it up for what we want it to be, so then when we commit the changes, it'll change the database. So now I can say subject.name. Okay, it saved it. We're good to go there. Let's see. And then I could change, well, that's all I want to change. So now I can do subject.save. Okay, then that commits the changes to the database. So now I can come over here, view this again. Okay, and now we see that it's not first subject anymore, it's Ruby on Rails. Okay. So that's the find save method. It's you find the one you want to mess with. Once you've found it, then you can, and when you're finding it, you got to save it. Where did I do it? Yeah, this is by far the worst part about this, is like scraping through this crap. There's so much stuff here. So anyways, then so I saved it. So I found the thing and I saved it inside of a variable here. And then I checked the name. The name was first subject. Okay, and then I checked the visible. And then I just changed the name to Ruby on Rails. And this is why this ActiveRecord stuff is so cool, because typing out subject.name equals Ruby on Rails, that makes so much more sense than having to type all this crap. Okay, the SQL that it generates. It just makes it a lot easier. Okay, so now we can do, oh yeah, and another thing that, notice how it didn't do insert. It didn't create a whole new row. It was smart enough to go just update it. So it knew that it already existed, so it just updated it instead of actually creating just something new. Also, we can say okay, and we can see that these are different. So it was created on the 7th of February at this time. I don't know military time very well. What is that? 11, 10, like 9, 3? No, I'm looking like an idiot right now. I don't even know. Yeah, I think this is wrong. It should be like 15. I'm not really sure where this is pulling that from, to be honest. Probably my SQL server. But anyways, you can tell that the updated at and the created at, they're different, because the created at will never really change, but every time I update this, the timestamp will change. So I'll be able to know when it was changed. All right, so let's see. We're going to do this now. So we're going to find the second one. So we'll say subject.find2. Okay, so now we're going to mess with the second subject one, and we're going to store that inside a subject. Okay, so it loads it. It tells us what it loads. Second subject, position 2, visual true. Yep, we're good to go. So we're done with this first one now, and we've loaded the second one inside of subject. So subject will no longer mess with this first one. It's only going to mess with that one. So now I can say, so before I could say subject.name equals whatever, but I want to do a bunch of them in one. So I'm going to say subject.update attributes. Okay, and then we go into that hash thing. So I can say name is equal to PHP rocks. Sure. Position we're going to keep the same. Oh, I always forget that. Remember the colon there, that'll get screwed up. Visible is going to be equal to false. We'll have them both be false this time. You know what? I'll mess with position too, just for fun. So position is going to be equal to, we'll say this will be like the fourth one. So instead of going, subject dot name equals this, subject dot visible equals this, subject dot position, blah, we're just doing it all in one line here. So we got subject dot update attributes. That's the method we're using. And we're going to update name to PHP rocks. We're going to update visible to false. And we're going to update position to 4. Now remember, you got to pay attention to, oh wait, I don't think I wanted, no, I don't want false to be in quotes. That will ruin it. See, I just made a pretty beginner mistake. Like false is a keyword, and so is true, and they're not strings. They're not considered words. So I shouldn't have had false inside of quotes there. I don't know if it would have broke, but I would have been doing it incorrectly because it's a Boolean type. It's expecting true or false. All right, let's see if the heavens smile upon us and if this works. Okay, so I hit enter. Now we can come back over here, view the data, PHP rocks, position 4. All right, cool, it worked. So we did all of that with the change attributes. Man, I can never find anything in here. Wow. Where is it? Sorry guys, this is getting ridiculous. I guess it's in here. I guess it, yeah, it has a little less than here because it cut it off. So it's just showing me what. So that's another thing that's crazy. Why can't I take this command prompt and just make it wider? It kind of blows my mind. Whatever. Anyways, so it worked. We're good to go. So that's how you can update things, multiple things on one line using the update attributes method. All right. Last thing I wanted to let you know with the update attributes is if I don't include position or if I don't include visible or name, it just leaves them alone. It only changes what you tell it to change. All right, so I'm going to create a new record now. So I'm going to go subject. Okay, remember this is a class. This isn't the variable that we're using right now. So subject.create. Okay, we used this a few minutes ago. I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to say the name's going to be equal to junk. Okay, I'm going to give it a position of 2, and I'll give it a visible of true. All right, so that should have created a new one for us. Take a look. There it is. So junk, positions 2, the visible's true. So let's say I create this and I'm like, wait a minute, no, I didn't want to create that. I want to get rid of it. I forgot. It's junk. I made it visible. I don't want junk to be visible because junk is junk and we don't like junk. Okay, so we want to get rid of it. So the way to delete it is, again, we can't just say delete this. We have to find it first. So we got to say subject because we're going to use that variable again, the class of subject, find. Now this gave it an ID of 3, so that's how we're going to select it. So there we go. Okay, it loaded it. It let us know. Okay, name is junk, position 2, visible true. Okay, we know we got the right one. So we just now, all we got to say is subject destroy. I guess there is a subject.delete, but I don't think that does it as good as it's supposed to, from what I've read. So destroy gets rid of it. there is no trace of it whatsoever. It just absolutely goes away and it doesn't exist anymore, which is happy. All right, so I say subject. Now that the one with the ID of 3 is in there and it's stored inside of subject, I can say subject.destroy. Okay, and it gets rid of it, deletes it. So if I come back here, refresh, it is gone. Now what's interesting is even though it's gone from the database, I can still inspect it. I can say subject.name, tells me junk. I can say subject.position, gives me 2. So once you delete something, it's still there for a while until you load something else into subject, and you're able to take a look at it. So if you're like, oh wait, I deleted that thing, but I needed to see what the Boolean was really quick. So I could say, all right, what was the visible Boolean there? Okay, it was true. All right, so you are able to play around with it even though it's gone from the database until I load something else into subject. Okay, so you're able to find records. Okay, we talked about that. So there's the primary way of doing it, subject.find. Okay, and we're using it. This is called the primary key finder. In other words, it's using the primary key. That's what that PK means there. And we're using that to find individual records on the database. All right, there's other ways to find things. So we could go subject.find by ID. And we can say 2. Okay, so that would give us PHP rocks. Okay, we can say subject find by name, Ruby on Rails. Okay, you can see that. So there's more dynamic ways. If I say I don't know the ID, but I know that the name is Ruby on Rails, PHP rocks, whatever, then we're able to find it that way. But it's basically the class name dot find by, and then whatever the name of the column is. So I could say find by position 1. Okay, so it grabs Ruby on Rails because it has a position of 1. So we are able to, those are called dynamic finders. So we're able to do find by whatever the name of the column is, and then you put in the value of that column. Okay, obviously the attribute has to exist. So if I were to say subject find by cat mittens, it's going to yell at me. It's going to be like, there is no attribute called cat, or whatever it was. Yeah, find by cat. There is no column called cat, so it's going to yell at me there. Okay. Okay, we can do all. So I can say subject.all. Okay, what that's going to do is just grab all of the records. So we have subject ID 1, name Ruby on Rails, and so forth. Okay. So there is the .all. There's also .first and .last. So I could say subject.first, and it's going to give me the first one, which is Ruby on Rails. Okay, and I can say subject.last, and it's going to give me PHP rocks because that's the last one. Obviously, there's only 2, but if there's like a million, it would give me the first one, and then the last one would give me the millionth one. All right, so I'm going to create another one. So we'll go subject. This is the class, not a variable. So it's subject.create. Let's go down a little bit. And I'm going to say, Give it a name of I'm awesome, guys. Trust me. CSS is styling, right? I'm old. Don't get mad at me. Then I'll say, let's see, the position, we'll give it, we'll make it like third, I guess. And then Boolean, oops, not Boolean, what am I doing? Visible. We'll give it, say this one will be true. Okay, so we create this new one. Now I'm creating a new one to just kind of show you some interesting things here. So I'm going to come over here, refresh this, view data, view all rows. So CSS is styling, it's there, great. Okay, position is 3, oh that's great. Now, but look at this ID. Isn't that interesting? It's 4. Because when we created the third one, when we created junk and it had an ID of 3, it took that ID for the rest of time. Junk was assigned the ID of 3 and it will have 3 until the end of the earth. Okay, so the ID just keeps auto incrementing. Even when you delete things, even when you get rid of things, it keeps the ID counting. So that's why this is 4 and not 3 anymore. So if we do like a subject.find by ID of 3, it returns nil. Okay, because it's empty. There's nothing there. So it just returns nil. Okay, but this is interesting too, though. If I go subject.find 3, it freaks out. So that's a kind of a big difference here, is the find by ID will return what it finds. If it doesn't find anything, it returns nil. Okay, but the find method will error out. So if you're writing code that when it's looking for something and it may not find it, you're probably going to want to use the find by, because it will return nil, and then you could have your code say, well, if it returns nil, do something. Where on this case, if you have a find and it's not there, it's going to error out and probably break the whole project and the whole app will explode, which you don't want. So that's a big difference there between find and find by. Find by will give you nil if it doesn't exist. Find, if it doesn't exist, freaks out and gives you a big old error. All right, so another thing we can do, say subject equals, we're going to do all of them. So I'm going to say subject equals subject all. So this is going to store all of this stuff as an array inside of subject. So hit enter. Okay, it loads it. Okay, ID of 1. So there's Ruby on Rails, PHP rocks, CSS is styling. It's all getting stored inside of subject. All right, because we did subject.all. So it stores everything inside of that table, basically, inside of subject as an array. So now if I wanted to, I could use some Ruby to kind of loop through all of this. So I could say subject.each, in other words, loop through each one, and then store each one of those things inside of, hold on, I'm going to say subjects. Oh, wait. I think I messed that up. I did mess that up. That's okay. We stored everything inside a subject, so subject.each do, and we're going to store each one of those things inside of a variable called subjects. Okay, so we loaded that into it, and now we're going to say puts subjects.name. That's just going to write out all the names to the console. Okay, and then I'm going to hit end. Then we get a ton of crap, right? Like usual. Let's see. Jeez, where did it all go? Okay, there he is. We put it all in. So when we hit end, it printed out all the names because we said put on the page or print out to the page all of the names that are stored inside of subjects. Okay, which is that variable that we put all of them inside of. So it printed out Ruby on Rails, PHP rocks, and CSS is styling. But the way this works, it goes, okay, it's going to return the array again. All right, so we could do that with any of the properties. We could say position, we could say visible, and it would print out everything there. But that's one way you can, we did this in the PHP class, right? There's a way you can access the array that contains everything inside that table, and then you can grab those different columns and those different variables, those different values inside of this database and print them out and do what you want with it. Okay, cool. So, going back, we could do some sort of we could find whoever it is, and if there was a name of them, we could say hi George or hi Fred on the page, or and grab that from the database. Okay, and like we already said, we could say subject first. Okay, and that gives us Ruby on Rails. We can say subject dot last, and that gives us CSS is styling. It's the last one. All right, so we're able to find things using, find by ID, find by name, position, visible. We can find by any of the columns. We can find by the primary key. Okay, that's the primary key finder. We can find all. We can find the first. We can find the last. Well, but what if we want to set up a little bit more? What if we want to set up more conditions? Like maybe find, I don't know, give me the record where position is 3 and visible is true. Maybe we want something like that. We got to put in more conditions. We need to do smarter searches. Okay, well, that's where we use the where method. Okay, so we can basically say where, and then we put in our conditions for the search, not conditions, conditions. Okay, so that's what we're going to do next. So we can do conditions when we search. That's what we're going to talk about here for a few minutes, and then we can order them, we can limit them, we can give them offsets. Okay, so there's a bunch of ways to do these conditions. Okay, well, I guess 3 ways. We can do a string, array, or hash. Okay, and we're going to do string first. So an example of a string, by the way, I keep clicking this just to make sure I'm recording here. So an example of a string condition would be something like where name, oops, it'd be like where name, this is equals, we need single quotes because we're inside of double quotes here, so where name equals PHP rocks. Okay, and visible equals false. Now, we've done some SQL, right? So this should look kind of familiar. This is basically using a where condition with SQL. Okay, where name is equal to PHP rocks and visible. Now, this is okay to do when you have static names. Okay, static text. In other words, in this case, it's always going to be searching for PHP rocks, and it's always going to be searching for false. Always, no matter what. But if I were to do this in a dynamic fashion, in other words, maybe add a form where I asked them to put in their name, and then depending on what they typed in, I did a search, this is where this could have some issues. So we had something like this. Our condition was where name equals, and this is how you pull things from Ruby. Okay, so we got at name. These are curly brackets, by the way. They look really ugly. Okay, so that's basically pulling in something that's stored inside of the name variable. Okay, not the name column, but the name variable that we pulled from maybe a form or something like that. The problem with this is because what if a hacker came in and they hijacked this name variable and they could have it do whatever you want? Well, that's what's called SQL injections. We talked about that. So if they come in there and they can hijack and make this variable be whatever they want, well, now they can do whatever they want really to your database. So these string conditions are good only when visible is always going to be searching for faults and visible and the name is always going to be searching for PHP rocks or whatever. If you're pulling in dynamic content from other sources, this really isn't the way to go. All right, so that brings us to, okay, so what's another way to do this? Okay, well, this brings us to arrays. Okay, an example of this is we got the square brackets. Okay, name is equal to question mark. And this is setting up the pattern, basically. And what we need to do is put something in there that's where question mark is. Okay, so name equals question mark and visible is equal to true. Okay, and then we can say CSS is styling. So this array, the way this sets it up is it sets up a pattern where it's going to be like, okay, name is going to be equal to we don't know yet, basically, and visible is going to be true. Well, it's going to put CSS as styling where the question mark is. Okay, so this allows us to, and if we wanted to, we could come over here and put in the variable, right? So we could throw in, at name or whatever. Okay, so we would be able to do that. So it would pull it in there, and then it would replace it in there, and that prevents SQL injections. Now, if we don't want the flexibility, if we don't want to be able to pull it from variables, but we do want the protection of not being able to be SQL injected, there's the hash. Okay, and we've kind of already done these, where you have the name is equal to PHP rocks. Okay, visible is true, and so forth. Okay, so this is just how you do these special searches. Okay, now these can be chained. In other words, I guess you could kind of call it concatenated together. So an example of this could be, we're going to do subject, right? Dot, and then we got to tell the search that we want to do. So we can say where, let's see, name is equal to Ruby on Rails. Where, oops, we gotta close out the little thing there. Where first name, well, not first name, it'd be more like visible is equal to true, whatever. But you can see that you can start, it's called chaining these together. So you can do search subject where the name is equal to this, where visible is true. You can start searching for multiple things by using the period and chaining all these different where statements together. Okay, now it's good to know that where executes, it doesn't execute immediately. Okay, in other words, when you write this in the Ruby code and you run it, it waits for all of these to come back and give the answers, and then it stores it and it does whatever you tell it to do. So when you write this inside of the Ruby code, where waits for all of these to run and to do all their searches, and then when everything's done, then it'll do what you tell it to do. All right, so enough with the examples. Let's actually do this. So I'm going to say subjects. So subject equals, well, actually I'm going to say subjects because it might return more than one. So subject is equal to the class subject, where visible is equal to false. Okay, we hit enter. Oh, there it is. So subject equals subject where visible is false. Well, what did it return? It returned ID 1. Yep, because visible is false. Okay, and then it returned ID 2. Yep, so PHP rocks, Ruby on Rails, but it did not return CSS as styling because visible is true. So that's how you can search for things in a database, like show me all of the records that are, false on the visible. Show me all the records that have a certain position or things like that. Okay, another thing we can do is we can say subjects.class, and it'll tell us if it uses ActiveRecord or not, if we're able to do all these different commands or not. I don't know if that's important, but if anything, that lets you know if these classes that you're using, right, these classes that you're using inside of your models are hooked up to application, or if they're hooked up to ActiveRecord or not. Another kind of cool thing that you can do is if you wanted to know the SQL, is you can say subjects.toSQL, and that'll show you the SQL that it's running, right? So it basically says select subjects, okay, everything inside of the subjects table from this, or select everything in the table from the table where subjects visible is equal to, I guess, F, false. But this is the SQL the ActiveRecord is running that gets it to work. So that's kind of cool to be able to see what the SQL is going to be that it's running there. Another way we can do this is we can say subjects well, I guess let's just go straight to the class. So subject dot where visible is equal to true. So we're basically inserting SQL in here inside of this little section. Okay, and it should give us the same thing. Well, it's only giving us the one because we're saying visible is true this time. So it gives us CSS as styling. So that works. So it does the exact same thing as where visible is true that we did up here. Jeez. I don't even want to look for it, but you know what we did because you saw it. But it's the same thing, just another way of doing it. We can also use the array format, so we can say subject using the class again, dot where. Okay, remember this is the ways to prevent the SQL injection. So visible, we set up the pattern. Okay, so this is the pattern, and then we want to tell it what to put inside of where the question mark is. Okay, does the same thing. Brings back CSS as styling because it's giving us all of them where the visible is equal to true. So just know the three different ways, play around with them, take a look at your database, start doing certain searches to make sure it does kind of what you think it should do, right? Now we can chain these together if we want. I could say subjects equal subject dot where. So if I wanted to check and get something back from multiple columns, I can say where position is equal to 1. So I want all the ones with position of 1. And then I want to add more conditions. Where visible, oh, by the way, Overwatch is amazing. If you guys haven't played it, you need to play it. Overwatch is equal to, we're going to want false on this one, so it'll actually find something. Okay. So subject equals subject dot where position is 1 and visible is false. So it's going to be looking for more than one of those. I hit enter. I forgot the little semicolon there. So I can press up on the keyboard and it puts in the exact same thing that I had before. Now I run it. So I put that in there and it's happy. So it gives me back Ruby on Rails because the position is 1 and the subject was visible and the visible is false. Okay, so you can search multiple things and this will return to you all of the records in the database where position was 1 and the visible was false. So if CSS styling was 1 and false, it would have returned that as well. So what if I did the exact same thing, but I say, where visible is true? Well, it can't find anything. There's nothing that has a position of 1 and a visible of true. So it returns an empty array right here. So if it returns that, then you know that, okay, cool, because right here it usually returns something inside of these brackets, right? But here it didn't, so it just returns an empty array. Okay, another thing we can do is subjects equals. So if I don't want .where a bunch of times, we can do a similar thing. So subject .where. Okay, so position is going to be equal to, let's say, 4. Okay, now instead of going .where again, we can just spread them out with commas. So visible is equal to false. All right, so position 4, visible false. It loads the PHP rocks is what we think is, what we should. Now, if there were multiple things that came back on that condition, if there was like 5 different things and we wanted to have just the first one show up, we can add .first at the end of this as well. Okay, and you can see that it puts the limit of 1 in there. But there's only one that has that, so it wouldn't work. So, if you're playing around with this, which I hope you are, you may want to go in here and add a bunch more, add 3 or 4 more records, and then give them similar values. And so when you do these searches, you're able to get multiple values when you do the things there. Okay, so those are the conditions. You're just saying, give me all the stuff that, has a visible of false. Give me all the stuff that has a position of 4, and you're able to get all the different things returned to you. Okay, so now there's other query methods. Okay, there's order, limit, and offset. So basically order, you can have ascending, descending. Limit is saying only give me 5 back or only give me 10 back or whatever you say there. And then offset is how many you want to skip. All right, so if you had an offset of like 10, it would skip the first 10 that get returned, and then it would start showing you from 11 on. I'm not really sure how far I want to go into this here. Well, I guess we'll just go through them real quick. So there's a bunch of different ways you can order stuff. So I could say order by position. Okay, and it does ascending order by default. So this would go ascending, okay, and it by position. So it would start at the lowest and it would go to the highest, and it would order it by position. So if I did the order, it would go Ruby on Rails first, then CSS, and then PHP. Right, and so the other one you could say is order by position. Okay, this is kind of going the SQL route. Okay, it orders it by ascending and it orders it by position. Okay, that column. There's order, you can do it the hash way, so position, and then you have to tell it to do ascending, so ASC. Okay, and this is if you want to actually say, all right, do ascending, even though it does it by default. The other way you can do it is position ASC, because that's how you do it in the SQL way. There's order position descending. Okay, so that's how you could do descending. And of course, you could do it the SQL way as well. So you'd say order position descending. All right, so those are just examples on how you can do it. So ascending is done by default. If you want it to descend, those are the ways you can tell it to. Okay, you can do multiple order statements. You can chain those together as well. So you could say something like order by position descending, comma, and order by name ascending. And I need the colon there. Okay, so that's another way you can do it. If you have tables talking to other tables, okay, there's this thing called SQL table disambiguation. So you have to tell what table you're going into to be able to mess around with. So the way you could do that, I'll type it over here just because it looks a little bit better, is you could say, order, and then you would have the name of the table, so subjects, and then you would say created at ascending. So if it was actually on, not the subjects table, but like on the sections table, then you would just say sections right here. So that's how you can hop from table to table. Okay, so let's start doing some of these now that we've seen some examples. So I can say subjects equal subject.order. We're going to order it by position. Okay, and let's see what happens. So it should go ascending. So Ruby should be first, then CSS, then PHP. So Ruby's first, then CSS, and then PHP. So good. That's did what we thought it would. You can do it the exact same way by saying subjects equals subject order, but we're going to do it the SQL way. So we're going to order by position, but we'll do descending this time. All right, so now we got PHP rocks first, which is right, and then we have CSS is styling, which is right, and then we have Ruby on Rails. So yep, that worked. Okay, we can do subjects equals subject dot limit 1. Okay, and that only returns 2. So I could say, subjects equals subject dot order 2. No. Order. Geez, sorry guys, I'm starting to lose gas here. Limit by 2. So now it gives Ruby on Rails and PHP rocks, so it limits and it only gives us 2. So of course we could attach more conditions on there, like if it returned a bunch of things and we only wanted to see 4 or 5 of them, we could throw a limit in there. Now the other thing is we can say subjects equals subject dot limit 5. Well, there's only 3, so it'll show us the 3. Up, if we had 5, it would show us 5, but it'll show us all that we have up to 5. So another one we can do is subjects equals subject dot limit 1 offset 1, and that gave us PHP rocks. Okay, so it only returned 1, but it said offset. In other words, skipped 1. So it gave us Ruby on Rails, or sorry, it gave us PHP rocks and it skipped Ruby on Rails. So we could say subjects equals subject dot, we can say limit 1 again, and we can say offset 2, and what should that give us? CSS is styling, right? Which it does. CSS is styling. So we are able to kind of mess around with all of this stuff, and we could chain all of these together. We could say subjects equals subject dot where. Okay, visible is true. Okay, and we want to order these by position. We'll do position ascending. Okay, remember that has the colon as well. We're going to limit that by 1, and we're going to offset it by 1. Now before we do this, we want to take a look at this and see what this is going to give us. We have, so where visible is true, okay, we got one of those. And the position, and we're going to order it, well, let's do visible false. That's going to make a little bit more sense, because that's going to give us 2 of them. So position, we're going to order it by position ascending. Okay, so we're going to get back 2 of these, position ascending, so Ruby should be first and then PHP rocks. We're only going to limit 1. We're going to offset 1, so we're probably only going to get PHP rocks back here. So let's see. Yep, PHP rocks is it. So it would have returned those 2 things, but we offset it by 1, and we limited it to 1, so it skipped that, and it just gave us PHP rocks. So we can chain all these together and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Okay. All right. Now, we're down to the home stretch. So Now that we know all these different ways we can search databases, insert things in, do conditions, do all this different stuff, we can create what's called scopes. And think of scope as basically a way you can create kind of sophisticated searches, give it basically kind of a variable name, and then just run the name of that variable name and it'll do the search for you. Okay, so these are queries that are defined in the model. So let's take a look at that. All right, so the way you write these is basically you say scope, got the keyword scope, and then you give it a name. So I could say something, I could say scope visible. So in this search, we would want it to return everything to us that's visible. So we do a comma there, and then this is used using lambda syntax. It's just some other syntax. That's really all I know about it. If you want to know more about it, you can take a look at that. So then you do a little curly bracket, okay, and then you type in your condition, your search, whatever you want to do. So we're going to do a search where, I need a normal parenthesis there, and you say where active is true. No, but I don't want active though. What am I doing with active? I'm going to say where visible is true. Okay, close that out, and then close out the curly. So that's it. Now there's another way to do it. So you can say scope, say we wanted to do invisible. Okay, you got a comma there, and then you just have dash less than. It's really the only difference. Okay, and then we set it up. So where? So I guess that's kind of the shorthand method. Visible is equal to false. Okay, so really the only difference there is you're typing out lambda or you're typing in dash greater than. Whatever you want to do there. Okay, so if we were to define this, all we would need to do is so once this was defined, to call it, all we'd have to do is come in here and go subject dot invisible, and it would run that search. Or subject dot visible, and it would run that search. Okay? So that's how you do it, and this is what the assignment's going to be. So you're going to have to create you're going to have to create some things inside of a scope file to be able, and that's going to be the assignment, and that's what you're going to turn in. Okay, now they can also take in variables, which we haven't done yet, but you could say something like scope var, we'll say take var, so that's going to be what it's called, that's the name, and then we'll say lambda, and I messed that up here, that needs to have a space, pretty sure that would break it, you need a space in between these. So lambda, okay, and then we could say the variable that's getting thrown in. So we could say like, maybe it's a type, well probably not type, it'd be something like, I don't know, whatever. That's going to be the name of the variable. Where, say that's your content type. So we got content type is equal to whatever. So maybe that's pulling from a form or something. It's something they type into a search box or whatever. So that gets passed into it right here. And then it does a search inside of the content type column inside of that table. And it does a search for whatever's stored inside of whatever. Okay, and the way you could pass that is it could be something like subject dot take var. Okay, because you're calling that scope. Okay, and then what you're passing in would be something like hi. So what that would do is it would pass hi to this scope, take var, and it'd be stored inside of whatever. So it's a content type. It'd be looking for inside of the column of content type. It'd be looking for hi. So that's how you can pass values into these scopes. You won't have to do that for this assignment, but that's one of the things that you can do. Okay. All right, so a couple things about Lambda before we show you how to write these, but it's ran when it's called. Okay. It's not ran when Rails boots up. These scopes just sit there and hang out until they're called inside of the code. All right, so that's good because sometimes you'll have SQL statements or you'll be calling the database comparing maybe today's date. Well, if the Rails application started 2 weeks ago, that's going to destroy it. Where with the scope statement, when you run it, it runs it, it pulls today's date, not when the app started running, but it pulls today's date and it's able to compare things as needed. Okay. All right, so now let's hop in here and we're just going to show you where to create your scopes. So we're inside of subject.rb. Okay, and we're going to put them inside of here. So we could try one. And this is where we get into the assignment here. Hop over to week 5. So also what I need, so for this week what I'm going to need is a screenshot of your database table. I just want to make sure that I just want to see your table and I want to see all your stuff in here. Just all the different things you're playing around with and what you put in here. So all you got to do is just grab, snipping tool and then, oops, that needs to go away. Like that would be fine. That shows me that you're messing around with subject. You created all these records inside of the table, inside of these columns. That's all I need there. And then I need a screenshot of your scope that does all this stuff. Okay, so let's do the first two. We kind of already did. So I'll give you the first two and then I'll let you figure out the rest. So again, you put them inside of here, inside of the models file. So subject.rb is what we'd be using for. So we'd say scope, and what I'm going to call it is visible, right? And I'll be using lambda, or you can do the dash greater than. Okay, whatever you want to do there. Okay, and it's going to be where visible is equal to true. So that's it. Next one, scope invisible. So that's what we're going to call it. It's lambda. And then we need to think of what we're doing. So where visible is equal to false. So remember, these can be called anything, just needs to make sense. So I'm going to save that. Now sometimes this doesn't work. Sometimes we have to exit the console and come back out, or at least I had to last time, but we can try it. So we can say, all right, we're using the class of subject dot visible. Okay, so it's not working. So I'm going to exit out of the console and I'm going to run it again. And now it should reload, and of course make sure that this is saved, but it should reload all of the model files and it should reload these scopes now. So now if we go subject.visible, it freaks out. Okay. Did I type something wrong? Yes, I did. I absolutely 100% did. Always do that. You guys hopefully saw that and were yelling at me like, dude, stop, what are you doing? So it probably still won't work, but we'll try it again. So subject.visible. Okay, nope, so we'll exit out. I can't even spell exit. So now we'll do Rails C, load it back up. Now if we do subject.visible, booyah, there it goes. So I say subject.visible, it knows that it's a scope, so it goes and takes a look at visible, and then it does what I define here. So this is a way to do it if you're doing a bunch of different commands and a bunch of different searches to your database over and over again. You can create them in here, do all the hard work once, and then you have just this one name to call it by. So I did a call for visible, okay, which should be just CSS is styling. Okay, CSS is styling. So now I can run the other one. I can go subject.invisible. Okay, and it gives me Ruby on Rails and PHP rocks, which is correct. So you need to create scopes that do all the visible, okay, and invisible. Show all the records in a table, ascending, sorted by their position. Okay, so you need to show all the records in ascending order, okay, by their position. Okay, same thing here, show all the records in order of the date they were created. That doesn't really, we're going to say, sorry, I didn't really tell you which way to go. So we'll say newest first, oldest last. Okay. And then, yeah, anyways, and then any type of query that uses offset, any type of query that uses limit, that uses first and uses last. I don't care what kind of query you write here, but you can figure out what you want to do there. The main thing is before you turn this scope in, it can be a screenshot or the actual file. I'd probably rather a screenshot. Test them out, just make sure they work. Get in there, write them out, save it, and then come over here, exit out of the console, load it again, and then just make sure that when you type these in, they work. And if they do, great. All right, guys, I know that was kind of a rough ride there, but we got through it. Hopefully, practice with this. You'll be able to edit and mess with your database here from the console now. You can be able to pull things out as needed. And then next week, we will continue the torture. So thanks, guys.